They thought I wouldn't notice, that no one would trace a stolen login at 8:03 a.m. from a device that had never touched our network. But Clause 12 in Quaibor was clear. And this time, someone important had finally broken it. The morning had started like any other. A lukewarm coffee in one hand, my badge in the other, the elevator stalling at floor 3 for no reason again. The kind of corporate deja vu that dulls your instincts if you're not careful. But that Tuesday carried a static in the air, the kind that clings to your sleeves even before the fire starts. I had spent 3 weeks building that presentation. Data integrity and trust, post-incident recovery paths, a 68-slide, high-level deck packed with redacted screenshots, comparative metrics, and a flowchart so clean it practically sparkled in Excel. It was my shot. After 7 years behind the firewall, I was finally getting 5 minutes of oxygen with the VP. The slot was internal only, private calendar, invite-only Zoom, locked behind dual authentication. No recordings allowed. Just me, the boardroom lights, and the chance to make something move. I ran the final deck at 8:01 a.m. sharp. Everything loaded clean. No flags. The version was current. The content was mine. Then the cleaner spoke. She never talks. She barely looks up from her cart. But today, she paused by my cubicle, one AirPod dangling, and said 6 words that rearranged my bones. Your presentation is live. Right now. I froze. My calendar said 10 ICAG. My invitees were executives, people who don't log in early, not even by accident. I opened Zoom in a cold panic. There it was. Live, recovery paths, Sarah G. Except I wasn't Sarah G, and I sure as hell wasn't live. I hovered on the participant list. 1 host, 3 attendees, all senior staff. Camera on. Mic muted. But the slides were moving. Someone was clicking through them, confidently, not fumbling, not pausing to read. Slide 12, the clause. Paragraph 12.4, misuse of credentialed access. And that's when I saw her. A faint reflection on the glass panel behind the whiteboard. Blonde hair, tall, sitting exactly where the VP's daughter sat during her summer internship last year. Her name hadn't been on the roster. She wasn't even with the company anymore, or so we thought. At 8:11, my phone vibrated. Threat intel, spoofed login flagged, source, legacy credential, location, mismatch, NYC. I felt my jaw tighten. I opened the logs. Someone had used my name. Someone had cloned my login, and they had launched my deck, under their face. 2 hours later, I sat across from legal, my screen mirrored to theirs. It's just a misunderstanding, someone said. Maybe she was helping. I pointed to the header. This deck contains breach details from January, compartmentalized data, NDA only. No intern has clearance for this. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, someone older cleared his throat. Clause, Paragraph 12 on Quaibor, he said slowly. That's not a soft policy. It's enforceable. But someone was already working hard to soften it. She didn't expect me to notice. She didn't expect the logs to stick. And she definitely didn't expect me to still have the raw version saved offline. But what she really didn't expect was that I knew who wrote Clause Paragraph 12.4, and he owed me a favor. You think Clause Paragraph 12.4 is just another line in a dusty handbook? Wait until you see what it does when you activate it. I didn't run to HR. I didn't call the VP. I went where the real stories live. Threat intel. There's a guy on floor 17 named Noel, ex-forensics, drinks hibiscus tea like it's a combat ritual, and talks to his code like it's a choir. He once traced a ransomware pivot across 4 devices using only a printer log. If someone spoofed me, Noel would smell it and show me the blood trail. I walked into his glass cube just before lunch. The lights were dimmed. Monitors glowed like stained glass. He looked up once, scanned my face, and typed 1 line into a console. grep, is.gomez, abrand var, auth, logs, all, auth, 212601.log. Then he sat back and waited. When the hits came in, his eyebrows arched like violin strings. 3 logins, he murmured, but only 1 device on record. The other 2 masked behind the same MAC address. He rotated the monitor. Timestamp. 08.03 credential. S.Gomez Geo. IP Brooklyn, but ping says Soho. Platform, macOS Ventura, non-corp device. Session origin, custom Zoom launcher. I felt heat rising in my throat. So, someone spoofed the login, faked the location. Noel didn't answer. He just turned and grabbed a book from his shelf. A printed manual, rare these days. Flipped to a tabbed page. Clause Paragraph 12.4, he read. Knowingly accessing company resources under falsified identity credentials constitutes breach of internal sovereignty and will invoke legal counsel within 48 hours. I blinked. Sovereignty? He smiled faintly. That means they just nuked their safety net. By 1:40 p.m., legal violation had been logged in the internal tracker. Quietly. Not public. Not escalated. Yet. But in corporate, silence doesn't mean safety. It means calculation. Somewhere between that Zoom call and the follow-up emails I wasn't CC'd on, a storm was already forming. And someone higher than me, was already trying to close the umbrella. I opened my inbox. 3 unread emails, one from the VP's assistant, one from legal communications internal, and one from the VP herself. No subject line, just 2 words. Let's talk. I stared at it like it might explode. Because when someone skips calendar protocols and writes in lowercase, they're not inviting a conversation. They're preparing a script. I didn't go. Instead, I pulled a burner. Old ThinkPad, wiped clean, isolated from corp Wi-Fi. I opened the raw presentation, the original file metadata still intact. Owner, Scomez created Dec 11 2025 Uro 9:44 a.m. modified, Jan 9 2026 6:21 p.m. location. Tag, corp share, drafts, legal redacted. I cross-referenced it with the version that was shown live. Owner, Sarah, VP created Jan 12 2026 07:18 a.m. modified, Jan 12 2026 07:56 a.m. Slides, identical. Visual theme, changed. My name, nowhere. Presentation theft, digitally laundered, and someone had gone to great lengths to make it feel native. Except they forgot one thing. I'd locked slide 37 with a checksum hash in the lower left footer, invisible in Zoom mode, only visible on download. I downloaded her version. Opened slide 37, scrolled to the corner. No checksum, which meant one thing. She didn't steal my deck. She used screenshots. And if she used screenshots, she had access to my desktop. Not just credentials, a window, a shadow, a trace. I stood up too fast. The floor wobbled beneath me. I remembered the cleaner's voice, that casual warning, almost like someone wanted me to see it, and that's when the thought landed like a needle in the chest. What if this wasn't a theft, but a setup? They didn't just use your name. They made you the smoke. But you haven't seen the fire yet. Corporate theft isn't always about stealing files. Sometimes it's about erasing names. Hit subscribe to follow the trail of Clause Paragraph 12.4. By the time I reached my desk the next morning, everything looked polished. My chair had been adjusted. My screens were off. Not asleep. Off. Even the stack of sticky notes I'd left skewed under the monitor had been realigned into a perfect square. If you've ever worked in threat response, you know what that means. Someone had been in. They weren't trying to hide it. They were sending a message. I sat down and pressed the power button. Nothing. I plugged in the ThinkPad I'd used yesterday. Black screen. 2 machines, both cold, both disabled, BIOS locked. I turned to my phone. No service. The network was still up. People were still walking around, sipping coffee, talking about vendor renewals and Thursday's all hands. But my devices were silent. Mine had been cut off. At 9:06 a.m., a security badge scanned in on floor 21. Mine. Except I was on floor 5. The building's access log showed an active session tied to my credentials, accessing a restricted internal drive labeled Legal Events, Archive 2023. By 9:08, I received a Teams ping from J. Rodriguez, Internal Affairs. Come upstairs. Room 412, now. No emoji, no context. Just that. Room 412 was colder than I remembered. Pale blue walls, no artwork, a single wall-mounted camera facing a table with no cables. There were 3 people already inside. Rodriguez from Internal, a woman I didn't know, her badge flipped backward, and someone from HR who looked like she had rehearsed an apology in front of a mirror for 20 minutes. Rodriguez spoke first. "Do you know why you're here?" I blinked. Because someone spoofed me and presented classified threat recovery data under a falsified identity? The woman with the flipped badge tilted her head. So you're denying access to Archive 2023 this morning? I narrowed my eyes. You mean the session that happened while both my machines were dead and my badge was on floor 5? A flicker. That pause when the script doesn't match the scene. I leaned in. You're tracking badge access, IPs, even chair pressure sensors, but someone still managed to clone my credentials twice. And now you're building a case against me? Rodriguez tapped his pen. We're not building anything yet. We're reviewing. But they were. The printer outside room 412 coughed once, twice, then spilled out a thick stack of A4. A junior aide grabbed it fast. Too fast. Red headers, footnotes, clause paragraph 12.4 in bold. They were prepping a compliance escalation. At 9:44 a.m., I received a Slack message from an old friend, Max, ex-SOC, now freelance. It read, "Saw your badge ping in legal events. You're not in trouble, but you're not alone in that archive. Check timestamp 9:02 and look for nested access. Someone stacked you." Nested access, a kind of digital piggybacking. One user session rides inside another, like a parasite inside a host. If Max was right, someone had used my identity to cover theirs. I stood up. The HR rep looked startled. "We're not finished." I smiled tightly. "You are." I went straight to Noel. He was already waiting, a trace log glowing on his screen. "Guess who was active at 9:02, he said. Sarah.vp, I exhaled. "But she didn't enter through her account," he continued. "She routed through yours. Nested credential override. Masked via a ghost session from a recycled Mac Mini still registered to... Guess who?" He turned the monitor. "VP's daughter. Asset ID SVPINT07 status, dormant since August. Re-enabled January 10th. Owner reassigned manually. It wasn't a theft. It wasn't a mistake. It was a design. And I was the scaffolding. But scaffolds don't collapse quietly. Not when they're wired with legal tripwires. And a clause that was written for exactly this kind of betrayal? You don't confront power in the hallway. You don't walk into the VP's office waving logs and hope the truth saves you. No. In this building, truth walks. But documentation runs. I knew Clause Paragraph 12.4 wasn't just legal decoration. It was a buried lever, drafted after the Mendoza incident, a credential hijack that nearly cost the company $4.2 million in regulatory fines. I knew this because I was the analyst who flagged it, and the ghostwriter who suggested the clause. Irony. They used my own clause to try and burn me, but here's the part no one remembered. Paragraph 12.4 has a mirror clause. Paragraph 0.4b, buried deep, rarely cited, designed for reversal. If a spoofed user can provide definitive logs and verifiable timestamp mismatch within 72 hours, the clause auto-triggers an escalation against the impersonator, a trigger they forgot existed. I didn't. At 7:12 p.m., I uploaded the raw logs to the private share drive, timestamped, hashed, and zipped under encryption. I labeled the file. Paragraph 12.4b, activation R package RV1. Then I emailed it to one address, Policy Corp Legal Secure. And I CC'd someone no one expected, Mendoza, not the incident, the person. Ana Mendoza, now senior counsel, the one they tried to bury after 2021. She replied 2 minutes later. I remember the clause. I remember what it cost. You're not invisible. Stand by. The next morning, a memo dropped like a thunderclap. Subject: ongoing internal investigation. Unauthorized credential nesting and legal clause. Paragraph 12.4b, triggered. From legal oversight, internal systems. To distribution group, tier 3 and above. No names, no accusations. But that memo set off a chain reaction. By 10:04 a.m., threat intel was pulled into a closed session. By 10:32 a.m., Rodriguez was seen walking into audit, eyes forward. By 11:00 a.m., Sarah, the VP's daughter, was nowhere in the building. Her Slack profile disabled. But here's the twist. The VP, she didn't flinch. At 12:17 p.m., I received an Outlook invite. 101 debrief, boardroom C, bring copy of clause. No apology, no context, no subject line, just a quiet summons. The room was empty except for her, seated, hands folded, expression unreadable. I assume you know this isn't how these things are usually handled, she said. I nodded. You mean without silence payments and sanitized timelines? A smile touched the edge of her mouth. You've embarrassed a lot of people. I documented a violation. Your daughter impersonated me on a corporate network. She weaponized my work. That's not embarrassment. That's felony level. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked me in the eye and said, "What do you want?" I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a promotion. I handed her a folded piece of paper, a name, an employee, brilliant, quiet, ignored, the one who trained Sarah when no one else would, the one who saw her clone the Zoom deck and said nothing because she thought it wouldn't matter. I want her on the security team, I said. Permanent, senior analyst, no NDA strings. The VP leaned back. Done. Then paused. And you? I stood up. You'll find out in the next board review. Because I wasn't asking for a seat. I was already building the table. They think the game ends when the email is sent, when the badge is deactivated, when HR whispers, "This matter is now closed." But in cybersecurity, we know better. Nothing's ever closed. It's just waiting to be reopened by the right question. And mine was simple. Why was Sarah even able to reactivate a dormant intern account in the first place? That wasn't user error. That was systemic permission drift. The kind that only happens when someone up top forgets to lock a window they built themselves. I pulled audit logs going back 90 days, cross-referenced asset reactivations, endpoint movements, and identity assignments by time and geography. Dozens of entries. One pattern. Credential spoof events had risen, sixfold, all routed through legacy access tokens, all during Sarah's shadow presence. The deeper I went, the messier it got. A spreadsheet from compliance showed that presentation theft wasn't just mine. At least 4 other decks had been silently remixed and represented over the past quarter, with just enough cosmetic change to slip under radar. Same theme, same timing, same silent approvals. I traced every one of those modified decks. Each bore the same fingerprint, Sarah, DIP, device ID SVPNT07. Asset re-enabled. Jan 10. It wasn't theft. It was a pipeline, and it had been running for months. I took it to Noel. He read the file in silence, sipped his tea, then said, "You're not looking at a rogue intern. You're looking at a ghost team." What's a ghost team? It's when someone unofficial, say a favored daughter, is allowed to operate behind a layer of silence. Unbudgeted, unlisted, unaccounted for. Their work is real. Their access is real, but their footprint is engineered to vanish, unless you know where to shine the light. Noel opened a private sandbox and fed in all 5 stolen presentations. He overlaid the metadata, cross-mapped the IP behavior, and ran a visual delta diff on the styles. Same design template, he muttered. Same custom fonts, not corporate standard. He clicked once more. A signature embedded in the theme code popped up. SVP Rise 2026. Rise, I asked? Could be a project, could be a code name, or it could be a campaign. I forwarded the whole package, logs, screenshots, code evidence directly to Mendoza. Her reply came fast. This is bigger than clause paragraph 12.4. You've uncovered parallel infrastructure. Board review now mandatory. Within hours, board security was looped in. An emergency meeting was called. I wasn't invited, but I wasn't worried, because receipts travel faster than reputation. At 4:45 p.m., I received one last file from Mendoza. No subject line, no text, just an attachment. File name, Policy Darn Clause 9.3, Draft, Reinstatement. PDF Clause 9.3, a dormant policy. Last used in 2018 to dismantle a VP-led shadow unit operating out of Dublin. I opened the PDF. My name was listed in the proposal. So was Mendoza's, and so was Sarah's. Except next to Sarah's name were the words, "Account suspended pending compliance investigation." This wasn't just a win. It was precedent. And precedent doesn't just punish the guilty. It protects the next analyst who says, "This doesn't feel right." The building felt different now. You wouldn't see it on the surface. Same polished floors, same scent of burnt espresso drifting from the break room, same vague hum from the air vents that never quite matched their schedule. But underneath, something had shifted. Something had cracked. You could feel it in the way conversations paused when certain names were mentioned. In the way, inboxes filled with just checking in instead of direct asks. The confidence theater had ended. Now came the audits. I was no longer locked out. In fact, I'd been quietly reissued a machine, this time from the Policy Enforcement Group, a division no one even pretended to understand unless they had clearance to log into Vault Console. The laptop arrived in a matte black box. No branding, no instructions, just a note. You've earned sight. Use it wisely. Inside, a default login, one I hadn't used since my incident triage days, brought me to a dashboard I'd only seen once. Access.log. System Oversight Level 3. There it was. Every file, every access attempt, every override going back 6 months. It was all visible. And the names? They weren't what I expected. Sarah had been sloppy, yes, but she wasn't alone. There were 3 others with override tokens tied to the Rise deck themes, one in finance, one in product, and one buried inside the CEO's Office of Strategy, not listed by name. Just the label, alias, cloak, assigned to special access, pathway credential, origin, VP override, manual inject. It wasn't just a rogue intern, it was a tree with rotten branches. I could have pulled the trigger, reported it, escalated to Mendoza again, let the fire spread. But something stopped me. Not fear, not politics, precision. You don't scream fire in a server room. You isolate, you patch, you document, you time it, because the most dangerous thing in corporate warfare isn't the thief. It's the one who knows what was stolen and stays silent. I needed to know why that silence had lasted so long. So I requested access to the Cloak origin file. Redacted, of course, but redactions only mean someone cared enough to hide it. Behind 5 layers of authorizations, the file revealed its root. Phase gate access, temp credential share for legacy asset SVP-INT07 authorized, LW title, Chief Operating Officer, COO, not just above me. Above the VP, above the legal team. Above Mendoza. This wasn't just a shadow op. It was institutional. That night, I sat in my apartment. Lights dimmed, laptop humming, one hand on the mug of tea I never drank. The document stared back at me. A signature, a date, and below it, the phrase, operational necessity due to board visibility constraints. In plain terms, if the board doesn't know, they can't say no. The theft hadn't been accidental. It had been authorized. But something told me it hadn't been authorized for her. Sarah was a pawn, a showpiece, a fire starter, meant to test the limits. But me, I was the data point they didn't see coming. The first rule of policy enforcement is simple. Never send an alert until you know who wrote the rulebook. I didn't call Mendoza this time. Didn't message Noel. Didn't reply to the encrypted Slack ping from Audit Watcher that simply said, "Careful, someone's watching your folder timestamps." I stayed silent. I watched, and I started logging them. On Wednesday, 11:13 a.m., the alias cloak session activated again. Same entry path, different target. Vault, legal drafts, revision plan V2.7, clause, paragraph 12.4 sunset draft. They were trying to rewrite it, erase the clause, bury the mechanism that had almost taken them down. Clause paragraph 12.4 had done its job, now they wanted it gone. But timing was off, because they didn't know Mendoza had already started a parallel draft. Clause, paragraph 12.4c, codename Whistle Return, a protection clause, designed for the next analyst, the next target, the next ghost. I compiled everything. Logs from Cloak, IP mismatch headers, the nested credential spider trail, the metadata from the Rise decks, and the access request signed LW, the COO himself. I didn't push it to the board. I sent it to one person, the Auditor General. A name I hadn't typed in 3 years. She wasn't warm, she wasn't patient, but she was incorruptible. At 5:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown caller, secure line enabled. I answered. Silence. Then a voice, clipped and slow. Your documents are under formal review. Do not interfere. Do not escalate. If asked, you are unaware of the clause 9.3 reinstatement. Do not leave the building. Click. I sat there. Frozen. They didn't threaten. They neutralized. They'd made me radioactive. untouchable, and in this building, that was as good as protection. But being radioactive also meant one thing. They expected me to disappear, to back off, to thank them quietly for not lighting me up. They didn't realize I'd already built my own fuse box. I returned to Vault Console, not to copy, not to expose, to schedule. Because if they were going to rewrite clause paragraph 12.4, I'd make sure they triggered it one last time. At exactly 08 Galler Monday morning, the Vault would auto-release a file package. Subject: Policy Integrity Risk Snapshot, Cloak Sessions, paragraph 12.4 Network Activity Logs. It would go to Legal, Mendoza, Internal Audit, Board Oversight, External Counsel, and one wildcard, the Office of the Regulator, because if corporate wouldn't prosecute, compliance might. But there was one more thing I had to do, one final visit, to the person who signed it all. LW, the COO, no invitation, no Outlook placeholder, just me, my badge, and a printout, the clause. Signed by him, dated, authorized. I slid it across the table. He didn't blink, didn't pretend to be surprised, just said, "You're very thorough," I smiled, "and you're very temporary." Temporary. It echoed longer than I expected. In corporate, no one says it out loud, but everyone knows. Your badge outlives your name. The title on your door means less than the timestamp in your access log, and no matter how high you climb, you're just one clause away from deletion. But he didn't argue, didn't try to deny it. He just watched me, like a man watching the last light flicker before a blackout. I left his office and walked directly to the Compliance Archive Center, a room most employees never even learn exists. Past the badge readers, past the vault doors, past the silence that feels like memory itself. There, inside a temperature-controlled drawer, I placed a copy of everything: Cloak session logs, Ghost team access trees, asset reactivation timelines, the Rise deck origins, the COO's authorization printout, and my own statement, notarized. Label: Policy Integrity Archive, Trigger Event, paragraph 12.4b, January 2026. Because someday someone will ask, how did this happen? Why didn't anyone stop it? And now there'll be an answer. When I returned to my floor, things had changed again. Noel's cube, empty. His nameplate, gone. His plant, still there, which was the loudest message of all. I checked the internal directory. Noel M. Access suspended. But not by legal. Not by IT, by his own request. A single note left in his workspace, scribbled on the back of a threat intel sticker. You did what I couldn't. Time to grow quieter. At 4:12 p.m., a global banner flashed across all Corp machines. Clause, paragraph 0.4 temporarily suspended pending policy review. All credential elevation requires direct VP oversight until further notice. The thing about banners, they're not warnings, they're obituaries. It meant the clause had become too effective. It worked, and so they froze it. That night, Mendoza called. No email, no encrypted chat, just a direct call, personal line. Her voice was tired, but steady. They're forcing a rewrite, new language, sanitized, the board's positioning it as operational efficiency. I asked, and the archive? She paused. Safe, for now. Silence. Then, you realize they'll offer you something soon. A title, a department, maybe even a task force with your name on it. I laughed. Will they call it Ghost Ops? She didn't laugh back. Be careful. Not all rewards are meant to elevate. Some are designed to contain. I ended the call and opened a blank document. Not a report, not a ticket, not a complaint. A letter to the next me. The next voice with a stolen deck, a spoofed login, and a badge that suddenly doesn't scan on floor 17. They will underestimate you. They will label you as difficult or too detailed. They'll call your documentation paranoid until it saves them. Don't stop. Don't vanish. Use the clause even if they try to bury it. The system wasn't built to protect you. That's why you're here, to change it. I signed it with a line they'd never expect. Clause, paragraph 12.4, personal edition. You'd think after everything, the clause, the exposure, the fallout, I'd feel victorious. But the truth is, victories in places like this are quiet. No applause, no standing ovation in the break room, just cleaner floors, tighter logins, and fewer hallway glances. I walked into the Monday sync-up and noticed it immediately. No Sarah, no veiled sarcasm in the meeting chat, just silence and coffee. A strange new culture had crept in. Respect through awareness, not fear, not authority, but respect. For process, for documentation, for watching when no one claps. The Rise decks disappeared from circulation overnight. So did every remnant of the Ghost theme and its signature font. In their place, drier slides, heavier legal footers, and a fresh watermark I recognized in the lower right corner of a new policy draft. Reinstated by Paragraph 12.4c. They hadn't buried the clause. They'd cloned it, made it deniable, more technical, less personal. But Mendoza's fingerprints were all over it. And somewhere in the middle of that legal gray space, there was a single line in fine print. Draft assisted by internal analyst, redacted by policy discretion. I didn't need the credit. I needed the clause alive. At 3:44 p.m., I received a calendar invite titled Strategic Insights Initiative, Founding Session. No sender, no recipient list. Just a location. Floor 23, glass room. I'd never heard of a meeting on floor 23. Turns out, I'd never looked up far enough. The elevator beeped differently as it passed 21. The hallway lights flickered once, like the building itself was thinking twice about letting me through. Inside, the room was minimal. Glass walls, one long mat table, 6 chairs. Only one was occupied. The COO, LW. You kept digging, he said, folding his hands. And you didn't leak. I said nothing. You're dangerous, you know. Only when cornered. He smirked. We need people who can operate under pressure, document, observe, navigate silence without making noise. So do internal affairs, or audit. This isn't audit. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a new badge, new title, no department, just one line. Embedded Risk Operative, Strategic Office. And a code name, Cypher DAW1. You're offering me containment, I said flatly. I'm offering you insulation, he replied, so you can keep doing what you do without ending up like Mendoza. A beat. I spoke to her, I said. She thinks this position is a ceiling with nicer walls. He leaned back. You can say no. I looked down at the badge. It was heavy, literal weight, and in the corner, etched in fine silver text, was a policy number. Part of 12.4, I smiled. This position doesn't come with a desk, does it? No, he said, but it comes with doors. So I took it. Not because I wanted power, not because I needed immunity, because this building had too many doors with no one watching. And now, there's one that is. You don't notice the change right away. Not in companies like this. Not when everything important happens in the metadata. The coffee machine still buzzed. The interns still trailed clipboards like security blankets. And the elevators, slow as ever, still paused awkwardly between floors as if eavesdropping. But inside the architecture of the company, something had shifted. A tension released. A wire rerouted. A memory logged. Clause Paragraph 12.4 was no longer spoken aloud. But it lived. Tucked in footers, referenced in onboarding, murmured in the pauses between let's loop in legal and just to be safe. People knew. They knew someone had tried to rewrite the rules, and someone else had refused. Noel sent one final postcard from wherever he'd vanished. Silence can be weaponized, but it can also be a signal. You chose the latter. I'm still listening. No return address, just the old Threat Intel logo and a single burned edge, as if the message had passed through fire to reach me. I pinned it inside my locker, behind the badge, next to the clause printout I didn't need anymore, but kept anyway. I saw Sarah once more, in the glass reflection of a building across the street. She was walking fast. No badge, phone to her ear, sunglasses on despite the clouds, not hiding. Just reformatted. She saw me. We didn't speak, but she paused, just for a breath. And in that breath, I saw it. The awareness of consequence. The kind you carry, not the kind you serve. Mendoza left, eventually, quietly. Her exit email was 7 words. Don't protect the company. Protect the truth. It became something of an underground mantra, printed in small font on stickers, whispered in elevators, carved into the side of a whiteboard in Vault Room B. As for me, I still don't have a team or a job title that fits on a business card, but the doors open, the lights blink, the logs come to me now, quietly, constantly, like confessions in binary. There's a moment that returns to me sometimes, not the confrontation, not the Zoom theft, not even the signature on the COO's memo, but that second in the glass room when he said, "We need people like you." He didn't mean analysts. He didn't mean compliance. He meant witnesses, people who document, people who don't look away, people who read the policy and remember who it was written for. So if you're reading this, if this file ever reaches your screen, if the clause gets buried again, if the pattern repeats, and it will, remember, they don't fear exposure. They fear the person who can prove it. That's you now. So write it down, save the log, screenshot the deck, and don't let anyone tell you silence is neutral. Because in places like this, silence is a strategy. And you're the exception.